Welcome to the Heartache Connoisseur podcast. I'm your host, Marty Carpenter, MD. I am a psychiatrist, just a country psychiatrist, actually, out here in flyover country doing the Lord's work. Here in the woods of Iowa, classically trained in the tradition of the great physician, here to talk to you today about fear. Overcoming fear, the anatomy of fear. So, but first, a point of order. Couple points, little housekeeping here. I've got to say thank you to my new patrons. I'm so honored that you would support the podcast, and I want to mention you by name. Lisa, Kathy, Kim, Brad, and Mom. Thanks, Mom. Mom, I mean, there was a higher donation choice than what you chose. I mean, I'm wondering why you're cheaping out on me here. I mean, come on. You know, you're not going to kick it up a little for old Sonny boy? Whatever, Mom. I'm good. I make my own living now. But no, I'm really honored that you've chosen to donate to support this podcast. And if you feel, if anyone else feels compelled to do that, you can go to my homepage, theheartacheconnoisseur.com, and scroll down to the bottom. There is a link to my Patreon page there. And we'll be getting you a gift coming your way. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that there is a new country, everybody. Number 2 last week. Norway. Welcome, Norway. I'm so thrilled that you're in the list here. You bumped the UK down a spot. And, I was like, well, what is the deal with Norway? Are they the IKEA people? No, that was Sweden. But you guys are right next door. And I think you guys were second. This probably annoys the crap out of people from Norway, right? When you get stuff about IKEA. The thing I've always thought about Iowa, which is kind of interesting, is that we had a heavy Scandinavian immigration here in the late 1800s, which means the implications are we have a lot of like super tall blonde people, and our barns are so well manicured. You know, you go, these Scandinavian people, they take care of their stuff. I'm from Missouri, God love Missouri, but the bald knobbers don't keep their yards as neat as you Scandinavians. I mean, the fences are painted, the barns have trim, painted a different color. Nothing's rotten. Everything's mowed. So thank you. Thank you for sending us your neat and tidy folk in the late 1800s. So this thing about fear, all right? I think fear's a big deal. I think fear dominates a good portion of our behavior. And it's not something we sort of like to admit. I mean, nobody wants to be a yellow chicken, do they? But, on some level we all are. We're all afraid of something. And understand, fear is normal. Fear is healthy. Fear is, in a way, what keeps our species alive. There are certain things you ought to be afraid of. A person without fear does silly and crazy things. However, excessive fear, misplaced fear, a misunderstanding of the consequences of fear, a failure to identify accurately your own fear will cause some problems in life in terms of relationships, chronic problems with anger, blame, complacency, and such. Now, there's existential fears, things like fear of death and abandonment. And then there's specific fears, phobias, heights, spiders, I don't know, things like that, snakes. And I had an experience here recently. Every once in a while, Shelly and I like to take off and go to Chicago for the weekend or something and just sort of chill out, check out some culture. So we decided to go to the Symphony, sort of hoity-toity, some snobby classical music. Now, I like to listen to classical music every once in a while, but I don't know a thing about it. I will confess. I sort of know, the difference between Mozart and Vivaldi a little bit, but when it gets beyond, the the big couple, 3 or 4 composers, Beethoven and Vivaldi, Mozart, Brahms, maybe Chopin. I'm lost. So, but that's beside the point. But we get there, and I'm thinking to myself, we're getting ready to pick out tickets online before we go there. And I'm like, well, who cares? We don't need good seats, right? We're just going to listen. This is about the sound. This is not about a front row seat. I don't need to be close to enjoy this. So we picked the cheap seats. We buy the cheapest ones we can get, which are in the very, very tippy top balcony behind a pole. And we show up and we find out our seats are on the 6th floor. So we start up the stairs. I'm getting winded. Shelly's not. She's climbing right up those stairs like a spider monkey. And right now the fire alarms are going off in town, and my dog's howling in the background. I don't know if you can hear this, but this is pretty funny. But I'm going to try to proceed anyway. But so we get up to the 6th floor, and we emerge onto this balcony, and immediately my heart starts pounding. You know, I'm like, look how far down that is. I'm going to fall to my death. Immediately I started seeing myself rolling down the stairs over the edge of this thing and plummeting to my death far below, falling onto these people in tuxedos and wedding gowns, drinking wine. And my heart was just pounding. I was clinging with the death grip to this railing. And Shelly's like, what's the big deal? I mean, she was fine. She was just starting to trot down those stairs. So like, I'm literally like both hands on the railing, one arm across my body, you know, going down this thing slowly. And I could care less if anybody was behind me, if I was making anybody slow or whatever. I was like terrified. And I'm like, okay, well, where are these things? God help us. I hope they're not right up there in the front row. Well, guess what? They're in the front row of that balcony, which means I'm going to spend the entire evening peering over the edge of this thing. Now, there is a guardrail, but somehow in my mind, it just doesn't matter. I still feel like somehow I'm going to fall over this thing. Like something's going to happen, and I'm just going to like slip and go head first over this. Now, as a mental health professional, I am aware that this fear is irrational, that I'm likely not to come to any ugly demise, and I decided to look at it as a challenge. I've been trying to kind of gradually overcome this fear. And so I took my seat, terrified, and Shelly was like, what's wrong with you? Or, are you not glad to be here? Like, no, I'm very glad to be here. I'm just, struggling with a phobic reaction and a near panic attack right now, but it's going to be fine. And I literally had my eyes closed for like the first several minutes we got there. And I finally opened them up, and I looked over the edge, and, this wave of terror washes over me. And Shelly's like, we should take a selfie. I'm like, I don't want to take a selfie. My God, I'd have to take my eyes off, the nearest thing I can grab onto if I start to fall over this edge. I'm not in the mood for a selfie. And so anyway, I realized that the way we treat this is exposure therapy. One of the modalities that we use to treat this kind of stuff in psychiatry and psychology. And so I'm like, all right, Marty, just expose yourself. Just not that kind, not with the trench coat, but just take it in. Look over the edge. Focus on something. See if you can key in on one of those guys down there with the viola. Check out their shoes and see if they're shiny and black. Look at the big basses. I was wondering to myself, I'm like, I wonder how many gajillions of dollars worth of Stradivariuses are down there. So anyway, I'm sitting there, and eventually it does get a little better, and then the music starts, and my mind begins to hear this music, which is just breathtaking. I mean, the Chicago Symphony's one of the best in the world. I think they're listed in the top 5, perhaps, and this music just washes over me, and the beauty overwhelms me, and the fear subsided completely. And it was an interesting phenomenon. Now, if I did begin to think about going over the edge again, the fear might resume. But I could tune into that music, and it would fix it, which I found to be a pretty interesting phenomenon. And it's sort of like, if your brain's not focused on it, you don't feel it. And then in those moments, you're essentially cured. So consider the spider monkey, like Shelley going down the stairs of the top balcony of the Chicago Symphony. These things live in the tippy tops, the very tops of the trees in the Amazonian jungles. Well, I don't know where they are. They're like Central South America and stuff like that. But we're watching this documentary called Planet Earth. They made a second Planet Earth. The first one was great. This one is just unbelievable. Like, I can't even believe this is real. The camera technologies are just amazing. So, they're filming these spider monkeys, and the narrator, David Attenborough, with his lovely British accent, comments, by the way, they use the metric system. So they're like, these trees are 700 meters tall. I'm like, how? I don't even know how tall it is. It's like a square kilometer is the hunting grounds of the snow leopard. I'm like, well, how big of an area? I don't know. I got to get out my phone and calculate metric conversions. Don't you know America and our backwards ass measuring system is the most important thing to keep in mind when you're making these films, Mr. Attenborough. So anyway, I'm looking up there at these spider monkeys, and the narrator says only 2/3 of these things make it to adulthood. And at the time he says this, they've got the camera on this cute little baby spider monkey. I'm like sitting there going, oh. And then I'm considering that 1/3 of these things plummet to their death. So, this fear of heights thing is real. There's a real threat here, people. If you fall, you die. So how do any of these things ever learn to climb through the trees and survive? So they show this little spider monkey, and he's beginning to kind of, I don't know, testing the limbs, and it's kind of gingerly moving through these trees, and at some point it slips, and its prehensile tail catches a branch, and it's hanging there upside down and can't reach anything. And it's literally hanging by its tail, and it's kind of screaming, and then its father comes and grabs 2 limbs and pulls them together so that one of them then is in reach of this little baby spider monkey. It's like the most beautiful thing ever, and the monkey climbs up on to the chest of its father, and they meander off somewhere and eat some, bananas or whatever they do. But my point is, this thing, to survive, has to face the potential risk of falling to its death. And they don't all make it. And so I want to say that the fears that we have are real, and oftentimes they're as a result of actual things happening to us that create these fears, and they're legitimate fears. And they're deep, they're instinctive, and they're survival based, and they're in our lizard brains and our amygdalas, and this is something we can't escape. I don't care who you are, how tough you are, whether you fight in the MMA or whether you're a computer nerd and everything in between, you're gonna be afraid sometimes, and that's okay, right? So the first thing here is you admit it. So what are some of the common fears that we humans experience? Abandonment for sure. People that are always in a relationship. There's humiliation. People have these dreams of public speaking, naked, fear of math. I have this recurring dream. They strip my medical credentials and make me go back and retake calculus in high school. Financial ruin. People stockpiling canned goods and firearms, and the end of the world, apocalypse, fear of boredom, people that can't stop, fear of our own minds, sitting down and listening to our heads, fears of loneliness, always needing to be talking, texting, doing something with our phones, around people, out and about, fear of ridicule, needing to fit in, wearing what's in style, keeping up with the Joneses, loss of loved ones, overprotection, helicopter parenting, and ultimately fear of death. And some would say that perhaps fear of death is the root fear of all, and the tendrils of that fear spread out and sort of create other fears that we experience. But here's what we do. When we're afraid, if we're not in tune with it, first and foremost, we deny it. We puff up our chest, try to be a hero. We act tough. We make up a story why we're not genuinely responsible for our own emotions. Like I could have said to Shelley, instead of admitting my fear of heights to her, I could have said, what are we doing in these seats? These are terrible seats. We can't see a thing. We should be down lower. I could make up something. I could blame her. Why did you book these? And we often judge. I mean, let's say, we're having issues in our own marriage, and we're afraid of abandonment. We're afraid of the loss, the financial ruin, the upheaval, the emotional pain. It's a common tendency to go ahead and just judge people that are divorced, judge people that are having relationship problems, judge people in counseling, that sort of thing. Well, we're making it, aren't we? We're still married. Well, they're, what do they know about marriage? They're divorced, and that kind of thing. We avoid ownership of our emotion. We engage in addictive patterns, cover. We get angry. We blame. We tend to punish. We desire suffering for the other that we consider to be the perpetrator against us. It's funny to think about how high and mighty we can feel while at the same time wishing ill upon someone else. I see it in my kids. It's like, they want nothing more than to delight in one or the other of them getting in trouble by me. I was asking my kids what they like about school, and the first answer is always when the bell rings and we get to leave. And then the second answer is, oh, I love watching other kids get in trouble. I mean, like, there it is, delighting in the suffering of others. Because, they're afraid of getting in trouble because it's humiliating and embarrassing. So it's sort of a relief, that moment when somebody else has to experience the same thing. So what ought we do with our fears? I see this in people going through marital and relationship problems. They're terrified. They're terrified of what it means to split, what this divorce is going to mean. Let's take this divorce example because this is common in my work. They're terrified of the financial outcome. They're afraid it's going to be unfair to them. They're afraid that people in their social circles are going to judge them, that they're going to think badly of them. They're afraid they're going to lose friends and family. And, what I told this lady yesterday, I was talking to her, I was like, look, that's all true. You might lose friends. You're surely going to lose friends. You're not going to be the good guy in everybody's mind. The people in town are likely going to judge you, some of them. Your lifestyle is going to change. You may have to move. You may have to get a job. You may not get alimony. I don't know. Now we're doing this, and I've known her for a long time, and I'm not dumping all this on her in a way to elicit some sort of terrible response. And I'm summarizing a very long session. But what I'm saying to her is, you've got to own this. You've got to explore these possibilities in your mind instead of sitting there terrified and hoping that none of this happens. And this is the exposure. I mean, and this is sort of like exposure therapy in a way. So let's say you're a germaphobe. You're afraid of contamination. One of the treatment strategies is to, let's say you wear rubber gloves all the time and, you won't go into a public toilet. I mean, this is sort of an extreme example, OCD type things, but what you do is you gradually expose somebody to germs or germy situations, or what they perceive as germy situations gradually. You might even show them a picture of a toilet and have them monitor their own anxiety in response to that. And then you might actually, go out to a bathroom with them and walk in. And then pretty soon maybe you have them touch the sink or the flushing mechanism there with a glove. And then maybe later you have them take off the glove and flush the toilet. And, if they're feeling really brave, dip a glass of water out of the base of that thing, take a sip. No, I'm just kidding. We would never actually ask anybody to do that. The point being is that over time, you gradually allow yourself to consider and experience the full measure of what you're afraid of. Like me sitting there looking over the edge. Now, that's not as far as I could go. Like if I really wanted to take on this fear, there's this other building in Chicago. I don't know which one it is, but I know you can go up to the top and like lay prone, suspended over this window, like with nothing underneath you. I see that and I'm like, why would anybody do this for pleasure? This makes no sense. I'll be down at the Nike outlet downstairs looking at Air Jordans or whatever. I'm not doing that. And then, let's say I did decide to do that successfully. Then I might consider, riding a Ferris wheel. Then I might consider getting on an airplane and going skydiving somewhere down the road. And maybe I never get around to any of that, which I doubt I will. But I mean, that would be a process. But we can do this in our minds too. And it's important that we consider the realities of the situation we're in. It's like as a parent, you send them off to school every day. And I hear people come to my office, this is the world we live in. I don't even feel safe going outside. I don't feel safe sending my kids to school. What if there's a school shooting? And it's sort of like the old, I don't think it's ever going to happen to me. It's actually a pretty good strategy in some ways. And in some ways that produces reckless behavior, right? You never put on a condom when you're having sex because there's no way you're going to get AIDS or whatever it is. But at the same time, if you constantly lived in fear of the worst case scenario, you'd be paralyzed. You got to send your kids to school, right? I mean, you got to go out and about if you want to live a functional life. And so what you do is you explore the fear in your mind and you get curious about it. Okay, well, what am I really afraid of? I'm super angry at my soon-to-be ex-husband. What am I really afraid of? Well, what I'm really afraid of is the fact that now at this point he has some control over how my life goes in a way that I'm very, very not comfortable with in terms of my material possessions, my lifestyle, my reputation. That's what I mean. And you get into exploring that and you take that one at a time. Well, my reputation, let's say. Well, what about how people think about me? We tell our kids all the time, you don't worry about what people think of you. Why am I so worried? Why am I so wrapped up in my own reputation anyway? And you dissect it. You take it apart. And pretty soon you realize maybe it's not so terrible. So what if I have to move? I don't even know if I wanted to take care of this big old thing by myself anyway. Maybe I'd prefer a condo where I never have to mow the grass or plow the snow. Maybe working would be a good thing because I'd be social and get out of the house. You take a look at the elements that are likely to transpire and you assign some potential positivity to them as you are ready. And then you overcome. And life, no matter what you do, no matter how safe you attempt to keep yourself, is going to put hard things on your plate. That's going to happen. You cannot avoid it forever. And if you stay inside, if you're independently wealthy and you never leave the house and never expose yourself to anything, eventually you face death. You're forced to let go. It's coming. And the sooner we face our mortality, the sooner we let go of all that which plagues us, the freer we are to live unencumbered by these fears. And that's the why behind this. Why face it? Why admit it? It's because you're weighed down. You can't be free. You can't explore. You can't open yourself to the possibilities. You can't really let somebody in to love you. And you can't really love them back if you're afraid that they're going to reject or abandon you. You can't experience any meaningful adventure. And so you sit there alone in silence and suffer, terrified. I think Yoda said it best. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering. He's right. He's right. So, recap. Don't beat yourself up. Fear's normal. Keeps us alive. Own it. Own it. Keeping up the outward appearances of the biggest, baddest dude, or, nobody can hurt me lady, or whatever it is, it takes energy, and it's not even true. It's okay to let it go. Embrace your frailty. Embrace your humanity. And take on a curious exploration of your own mind and your own fear. And there you'll find relief. Well, that about does it. And I don't know, we got to bring God in a little. I'm a God guy, and I think this is the thing. It's sort of like that spider monkey, and the dad came and rescued her. It doesn't always feel like that on this side of eternity. We don't always get rescued. Daddy doesn't always come along and fix what's broken in the way that we would imagine it. But I've got to believe that part of the reason this universe is set up the way it is so that we do, in fact, have to face these things. Because when we do, it makes us humble. It makes us aware of the truth of our nature. That we have needs. That we need a rescue. We all need a rescue. We all need a savior, so to speak. And I believe that on this side of eternity or the next, we get it. If we want it, if we ask for it, if we're open to it. If we let down the show, if we let down our guard, admit our mortality. And that's so beautiful. I mean, to think about that, the idea that in our terror, we're never alone. That there's a safety net. Because there is. It's invisible. And it doesn't look like what we would want it to sometimes, a lot of the time. We want a God that responds to our magic wand. Not considering the notion that perhaps this being is wiser than us and that there are things to learn from us having to face the things that we're most scared of. So open yourself. That's what it means to grow, to be saved, so to speak, is you open yourself to the saving, whatever it looks like. You allow it to take its course. You allow yourself to be changed. You allow your beliefs about yourself and the world around you to be altered. That's what salvation looks like. So, we're all in the same boat. We're all a bunch of spider monkeys up there, hoping we don't plummet to our death. We're all at the front row of the top balcony at the symphony. And we all could, if we wanted to, choose to let the beauty overwhelm us. Thanks for listening, everybody. It's my distinct pleasure to bring these to you. I hope that you find them helpful. Please share them. Please subscribe. Get yourself a podcast app. Go on SoundCloud, subscribe. Go on YouTube, subscribe, like, share, etc. consider the Patreon. And don't hesitate to reach out. Post a comment on the Facebook page, whatever it is. Love to interact with you and hear back from you. Thank you.